Unable to attend your equalization meeting, I am writing this and would like to read and consider, first of all, there are false statements made and I want to clarify and correct them. The state told me to put the Wells County address on the notice of acceptance sheet, so that's what I did, but I also listed my name and phone number to the attached sheet there. I told Jana and Denise to tell anyone that called me, they had 6 or so calls, there were only 2 that complained, and they were Merv and Tammy connected, Red Hawk, their properties were adjusted, their complaints are related to the problem that the town board has been having this past year. Both Hurdsfield and Bowdon boards are all familiar with all the properties, as was proven in Hurdsfield on equalization meeting. Bowdon needed an increase last year and again this year, so that was requested by the tax director also to make adjustments in Hurdsfield with the attachment that she has. I felt sorry to Gerald Lester at the meeting that was his first equalization meeting, and as the board and assessors were getting looks that could kill an innocent. Hopefully things will settle down, and I'm only asking you not to stir the pot anymore. As far as me saying I had health issues was a true statement. There were 2 people receiving. There were 2 people receiving $10,000 increases in their values in Jamestown and Bismarck, and 1 person in Bismarck had an $80,000 increase. None of these had any improvements, etc. Thank you for your time, Bev Hart. I don't know what that last one, does that mean that, I wasn't going to say, mine went up 40,000, it was Harvey. What's Bismarck and mine kept to this stuff? I'm just reading the letter.
There's those attachment sheets, I guess, if you want to.
And there's attachment sheets on here.
This first one is the letter that she sent out, or a copy of it, which has Wells County's name on top and then hers, but like we all knew.
Were you at the meeting that you're on record with that?
Yeah, I would work.
Yeah. Were you?
Yep.
Okay. That was the same meeting everybody was at.
That was at equalization.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So
for what it's worth.
Yeah, what she told me, she dropped it off. Basically, I guess she heard through the grapevine that stuff came up and just was trying to clarify. I don't know.
She called me about, as long as we're on this subject, she called me about a week ago saying and wondering why it was put on the agenda last month as to the question of Hurdsfield evaluation. She was wondering what went on, just almost a paranoid type of deal. Why we discussed it, and I said, well, we discussed it because we heard reports that assessments in Hurdsfield were too low. I think that's where this letter comes from now. She's trying to justify her actions. She's trying to put things together.
Yeah, it sounded like mostly because of what's going on in Hurdsfield, all the action there, I guess. Which I talked to someone from Bowdon, and Bowdon was happy with everything.
So is Hurdsfield, because they're all really low.
So yeah.
People down there are very happy.
But there's some real inconsistencies, or?
Yeah.
You
know,
just like this out.
I don't mean to interrupt, but this is equalization meeting. Maybe we can put that as an agenda on the regular meeting. That Jana went down there and explained the Canva system to them Monday. But that's not related to the equalization meeting. That they should be put on that system versus theirs. So the issue is that's more of an issue for our regular meeting, not this, right? Yeah. Oh.
I'm okay.
countywide, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so she would, trying to tell me that, yeah, that wasn't her fault, she was like, you understand that, eh? So, I don't know. But, yeah, there's attachment sheets there if you guys wanna look at them, I did.
Okay. Now we'll focus.
Okay, we should have had these in our pockets, I believe, right?
Second and third page.
Okay.
So the one that looks like this,
Third page.
Yep.
this year, our median ratio, when we redivide all of the assessments by, or the sales prices by the assessments, was at 91%, which was within the tolerance for the state. We haven't touched a lot of commercial yet. That's kind of our start reviewing commercial property. The problem that arises with commercial is the state wants you to have 30 good sales to indicate whether you need an increase or decrease. We have to bring in 3 years plus the current year's sales to get enough good sales for commercial. And sometimes we end up having to do an in-house appraisal or two to make 30. And so we're going to look at that for this coming year, hoping to get through. We've got some residential to do too, so hopefully we can start in on the commercial property a little more than we have been. All in all, we are still within tolerance with the changes made. It'll be at 91%, so you have 9% that you could increase if you so chose. Residential, the median ratio of our sales was at 87.6. We would have needed a minimum of 3 to 4% to be even at a tolerance level for the State Board of Equalization. Between us and Scott's, the total increase for the county brought us to a 95% tolerance rating, and we have 5% leeway ahead of side. So with residential and commercial, once I submit to state, we will be within tolerance with the State Board of Equalization. The next 3 pages is, one is your agricultural values. Again, we needed that decrease. The decrease ended up being 3.9% overall. That would be this sheet. And we just list the different townships, and you can see that each one went up, or went down, from about 3.6 to 3.95, depending on the soil traits and classification in the soil. Egg, non-egg, that kind of thing. For residential, again, we can see an overall increase or decrease per township, or again, city. The increase overall was 8.49%. You'll see it changes in supplemental abstract column. That is the column that we have to resupply the state with any changes due to new construction or demolition, or went from taxable to non-taxable, or changing classification from residential to commercial. The state takes those numbers out when it comes to the overall increase or decrease. That's why we have to list them separately, because that does not get included in the tolerance levels when they do the math on that. Commercial, again, you can see the township and city, the overall increase was 0.03%. Again, the changes in supplemental would be change of classification, reconstruction, demolition, that kind of thing. So, like I said, we'll be within tolerance for state. The next, we were busy yesterday afternoon, and we'll have 3 properties to You don't have these because I just printed them, but I'll go through them. We visited with Albert Kruger and Harvey with that property to the north of where he's building, where he's running his office now. Long story short, excuse me, long story short is that the New Life on Main Church had some sewer issues in which they replaced the line of some sort or other. And previously, and unbeknownst to him, back when they built the buildings, they tied in his sewer to their building's sewer. When they replaced it, they did not tie in his sewer, so he no longer has access to sewer. Which, without having sewer or anything like that, it's an unusable building. It's fixable, and I asked him, I said, have you gotten a quote or something to see how much it would cost to cure the problem? And he said it would be between $30,000 and $40,000 because you would have to either go to the north, to the main, or to the east, to the main with a pump. So it's curable, but it's useless until it's curable, other than he's got cold storage. So what I ended up doing, right now the value was sitting at $33,000. And what I ended up doing is because of obsolescence reasons with not having workable plumbing, we gave it a 50%. Let me double check this. We gave it a 50% obsolescence due to non-functioning and 20% obsolescence due to the fact that you can't use it the way it's intended. I have to list it as office space because that's the best use for it. And then you take off obsolescence because it's not usable. The value then becomes 15.4. And you'll want to do an emulsion. You can adjust the obsolescence if you so feel like it needs to be adjusted. I did visit with him after I ran these numbers, and he would agree, you know, that if the plumbing was working, it would be worth 33 or more. But because it isn't, then it felt like it would be more around the 15 to 20,000. The second one, which is kind of an interesting one, is Sean Wells at the Artos. So when I was plugging in, I had to send out notices and letters saying whether you were approved or denied as far as the primary residence credit. And he applied for primary residence credit on the Artos. And I contacted state after visiting with Sean because he's actually living there. And they said, well, if he's living there, then you have to get it to him. Okay. So we went up yesterday, and he gave us the grand tour. And so there's about 2,000 square feet of what he's actually living in. And so what I did is I moved, or I valued the portion that he's living in as an apartment and put it into a residential value. And then I applied the primary residence credit as per state. So essentially what happened is $35,640 was reduced from the commercial aspect of it, because that is no longer being used for a commercial purpose. And I moved it to residential with the new value being $28,150. So it's roughly $10,000 less than what it was. The last one that we visited was Dolores Lux. She took us to her basement back in, you'll be able to start this better, but back in 2009, there was an issue with water. First being that a neighbor, something must have happened with the main with theirs, and then water ended up being in their basement. It was a finished basement, but once, and then they had a big storm in which they ended up with more water in the It had been a finished basement, and they had to tear it all out, due to mold and some other issues. And when I looked at the foundation, there are some very visible, fairly deep horizontal cracks in the foundation. What she told me was that, in order to cure that, they would have to essentially lift the house and redo the basement. And that's a fairly hefty thing. Basements add value to the house due to foundational work. It's not as much as the person thinks it is, but I ended up throwing 10% obsolescence onto the basement, and it ended up decreasing the value of about $68,000. So the valuation went to $67,040. Any questions?
Like you did a lot of work there.
Three is below average.
Do you need to act on each of those?
Yes, so,
Separately?
yeah, so if you were to do a motion, I would say that you would want to, maybe not, I would do each one individually. So, Dolores Loves, you would say to approve the 10% obsolescence to the basement. For Sean Wells, I would say to approve the commercial value decreasing 35,640, the structure residential increasing 28,150 due to livable residential space, and Albert Krugers to approve the 50% obsolescence due to sewer and 20% due to use. And then make a motion to approve the overall changes as presented.
Well, let's start with your top one, the Albert Cougars.
Yes.
You need a motion for the obsolescence and. You want to repeat it? You wanna get it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, won't repeat it.
Of the 50% and 20% for 30% and 20. because
50% for
It's total.
sewer and 20% for use.
Got that down?
No, but I'll see you on here.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Second by Brian Welch. Any discussion on it?
You know, he didn't tell you the whole story, because when the church redid theirs, they offered him to go in on it.
Good info. I was
He's too
wondering.
tight to spend any kind of money. They weren't gonna
Well-
do his for him.
I would say something else. In legal terms, they were required to do it because it was before. They were required to do it because it had been done before. That was their requirement. They would not have done it.
Whose requirement? Churches.
The way the law sets up, if that was in place before, it had to go back like it was. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
See, it was hooked up before, and so in order to do this, they were supposed to rehook it the same. That was their cost.
But that's nothing we can do about it.
No, I know that, I mean, yes.
Yeah, it seems like a fair evaluation. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Alright.
Opposed? Motion carried. Second one is wellness.
So you would need a motion to decrease the commercial value by 35,640 and increase the residential valuation on the structure 28,150 due to livable residential space.
I'll make a motion that we decrease the Marco's commercial value by set amount and increase Sean's residential by 28,000.
Okay, very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Brian Miller. Any discussion on that one? You said you got the tour of the whole outfit there?
It's still
Not-
have like
Not the
bright
whole, you didn't
red.
get the whole tour.
They still got the nice white red carpeting from
But the restaurant and all that.
We were there a couple of years ago when we talked to you there.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
So Dolores Louts would need a motion for a 10% obsolescence due to foundational issues.
All motion to approve the 10% discount.
Okay, motion made by Brian Miller on North Louts. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Stan. Any discussion on that? I think there's some that fix that up.
Think so.
He's offered.
Any good son would.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
And then the final one, we would want to approve the 3% increase on commercial, the 8.4% on residential, and a decrease of 3.9% on ag.
Right. Need a motion for that.
Just,
A motion to approve the amounts Jana gave us, which
Motion made by Brian Miller to the increases and decrease. Is there a second? Second by Boone. Any discussion on that?
well, just for informational purposes, because overall county evaluations are extremely important. Do we consider, and is this a lot of work, Jana, to raise the commercial up a little bit because we're at 91%?
So if you were to do, if you're going to increase, I would increase across the board.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's what I meant.
So all that would take would be, send a letter to the different entities that's which is no big deal. And then, our program has an option to increase by a percentage overall, so it's 10 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm just, on a, ag is 393,
390,
390,
3.49, yeah,
residential is 8.40,
49.
49. I thought there was something wrong here. And commercial was 3.0 or
0.03.
0.3. Point three or 0.43?
3.03.
That's different. And that was an increase, right?
Yes.
In regards to your point, you could change it and go up some, or you could wait a year and it's probably gonna go up quite a bit.
Yeah. I just threw it out there, exactly.
You're
Sometimes,
at the very, very bottom. of the
sometimes some
threshold.
and a little more is better than quite a bit.
Well, and that should be understood because they're at the bottom of the tolerance rung.
Right.
No, so they're probably gonna get kicked. If we don't do something, they're gonna get kicked hard in the subsequent year.
And essentially, when you do commercial properties, what you will see, is just like residential, you'll see some increase, you'll see some decrease, you'll see some stay the same or similar, because that's what mass appraisal does. But if you increase now, it will decrease next year. It needs to, individual property needs to.
Well, I certainly would suggest changing that 91 to 93